Time where we have a conversation with a man who's in the hot seat. He's a gubernatorial aspirant for Nairobi. His name is Gachoka, journalist turned politician, but still somebody in spaces that we can have conversations around today on public discourse, and he's in the hot seat this morning. Gachoka, good morning.
Good morning there to you, and happy to be at SpiceFM.
Good to have you here. At least we're doing something today that's never been done.
That is?
Having you in the hot seat.
As a veteran jamaa wa hii mambo ya media, I would be actually late not to have come to SpiceFM because it's a leading voice in the morning. It's the place to be.
Well, thank you that you're here. And as we get into this discourse, we'll be talking around issues about whether we're actually sliding into authoritarianism. We'll have a look at that. And of course, the different political intrigues that come into that discourse are necessary for us to look at the moment. But before we do, Dennis Aseto has taken us to a country far off in the west part of Africa. And he'd like to share a proverb, which we'd love your interpretation of.
So the country has a population of around 230 million people. Earlier this week, we woke up to the sad news of the former president having passed on. We are in Nigeria. The president talking about is the former president actually of Nigeria. Now, when you talk about Nigeria, there are different foods and cuisines that they have. You talk about jollof rice. There's always jollof for who has the best jollof, either Nigerians and Ghanaians. In studio today, we say Nigerians have jollof rice.
Because you don't have a choice.
Best,
because
the
you
best
want to live till tomorrow.
But aside from that, now they have fried rice, they have egusi soup, they have obono soup, okra soup. Okra is especially when you have it with something they call swallow. Swallow goes really, really well. But let's go to the proverb. Swallow for another day, right? Now, the child who washes his hands eats with elders. The child who washes his hands eats with the elders. How would you interpret that, Tony?
Well, that's a fantastic way of saying it. It's part of preparation in life. The fact that you're in the company of older people, you begin to learn courtesy and mannerisms. The foundation of every individual is character. Psychology defines behavior to be caused. And to understand behavior, you must understand the reasons and the causes of behavior. So children at the onset of life are actually molded or their character made by actually doing things that they see older people do. So washing hands in preparation to eat with elders is part of that journey of preparation.
Wow. Indeed.
Yes, absolutely.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and of course in Ghana you have gali. And here we have ugali. And of course with the subject of today, I'm just flabbergasted to actually live in a country where in less than a year and a half, the president has completely destroyed the constitutional order, making this country a mockery of the republic that it was formed in 1964 on the 12th of December. Most Kenyans, of course, know that graduating from colonial rule, Kenya became a state under the Queen in 1963, and just for 1 year, it transitioned into a republic. Now, a republic is a democracy. A republic is a state where people, through their sovereign will, elects representatives to be able to delegate authority to them so that they run the government in order that the people have a better government. So the whole basis of the republic and the democratic state is that leaders are subservient and are meant to be of service to the people. In a country where you have a president where he believes that he's the Alpha and the Omega, that he and him alone can wake up in the morning and decide between life and death, is not just tragic, it's very unpresidential and very undemocratic.
And this is what you see to be the current state of things, that with all that we've seen happening, whether we're talking about the Mandamano that came about as what we now know as an economic revolution, which is the Sufuria Revolution in 2023, and then getting into 2024 when people said, no, absolutely not. The cost of living is through the roof. This is absolutely crazy. We cannot have the situation which we are currently in continue for much longer, and then come along the finance bill and people said absolutely not, shut it down. We came into 2025 when they said we're going to remember those who were lost, and we've seen the economy then continue to steep and drop into this abyss of what we are looking at today. And people have said, no, do you see that this is all resultant of an individual who has taken the reins and said, it's going to be me and me alone. It will be my way or the highway?
Well, the Greeks have a saying that those the gods want to destroy, they first make mad. You know, if you look at it from KANU's point of view, the Independence Party of Kenya, there has been 5 presidents. The conduct of Jomo Kenyatta, the conduct of President Moi, the conduct of Mwai Kibaki and Uhuru Kenyatta are a mirror of how presidents have acted when they have had power and when they have exercised that power. And there has never been a president in this nation since independence who has been an enemy of his people. I mean, you're talking about a police state that is murderous, a state where people are abducted, a state where people are scared of their government. You're talking about a young girl, Julia Joki, 24 years old. If you were to listen to President William Ruto and Oscar Sudi and Kipchumba Murkomen, you would think that this country is full of gangs of goons who are walking around armed with machetes and with fimbos going around breaking people's homes and shops. And therefore, their argument is you arm the police to the teeth and shoot to kill or shoot the legs. But in this lady, Julia Joki, a humble 24-year-old girl, simply born in a rural village in Nyanyuki, walking out to exercise her democratic rights, to say that things are not good in the country, marching and, participating peacefully, is arrested, taken to court on trap charges, given a bill by a very unreasonable court that she could not pay of 50,000, and the girl is sent to her death at 24. And here you contrast that with a very brutal police force where Edward Lagat is now back enjoying a pension and a salary after the death of Albert Ojwang. I want to tell Kenya, and I want to tell Kenya from the studios at SpiceFM, we are in a dangerous situation because we are in a government that has lost moral authority. We are in a government that is a criminal enterprise. A criminal enterprise because there is no constitutional mandate or authority to kill people for absolutely no reason in order to perpetuate political power.
Yet this same man was a student of the regimes that you just earlier talked about.
Well, let me be clear, and that is good that you are saying this, because, democratic evolutions grow because people grow with them. Part of the difficulties that faced KANU in the original years was the one-party state, the feeling that people wanted democratic governance in order that there be a more accountable government. And Section 2A was fought for, and the clamor towards Section 2A led to the multi-party state, of which KANU conceded, and of which that led to the first multi-party elections leading to the election of the late President Mwai Kibaki. Thereafter, under Mwai Kibaki's leadership, and Mwai Kibaki himself was an original member of KANU. He was an executive director of KANU, let alone Raila Odinga, who was Secretary General of KANU, and Kalonzo Musyoka is still a life member of KANU. There is nothing wrong with KANU. Tony Gachoka is here as a member of KANU to ensure the Independence Party rose again and is revived. But in those days, what has happened is that democracy has grown. We went through Bomas of Kenya. We went through the debate for a constitutional order leading to the 2010 constitution, which removed from presidential power the ability to detain without trial. It removed excessive powers of the state through the amendment of the Chiefs Act that could allow arbitrary arrest. And therefore, the environment we are living in is the 2010 constitution. I'm not surprised that William Ruto and his government are really unable to understand the 2010 constitution, because throughout that process, I never saw Ruto. I never saw Ruto at Bomas of Kenya. I've never seen him march for no reforms, no election. In fact, the only time I remember Ruto politically was in YK 92, where he was just looting money and making Kenya an ungovernable state from the beginning. So if you have been born of the reforms, and if you have been a participant as to why there needs to be a Bill of Rights, why there needs to be a constitutional order that protects citizens of this country, you would respect it, because that process has been born of blood. That process has been born of sacrifice in order that the citizens of Kenya are protected.
Yet, Tony, when you look at, you've said that democracy has grown, and rightfully so. Constitution of Kenya 2010 is so clear on what needs to be done. The command responsibility, police is utterly independent. Look at Parliament is independent, should do its work according to the ethos as espoused in the Constitution. But you talk about Parliament today, it has been captured by the state. Talk about the police still taking orders from the president. Why does it seem as though it is so easy for people to disrespect the constitution?
I think that is one of the best questions I've heard recently in the media, because it was a fraudulent election. The last general election was absolute fraud on both sides.
How so, Tony?
Because the Azimio coalition was standing in this nation to get a mandate as the opposition. The Kenya Kwanza coalition was running to seek a mandate to form government. When the people spoke, and the people spoke, there was a government, and then there was an opposition. The first cannibalization of the people's mandate was to take elected opposition MPs, to take them into the ruling coalition to defeat the purpose of the election. So there was a forced majority of government, not by the act of the people, but by the act of the leaders themselves. Then, led by Raila Odinga, the country was duped into NADCO talks that were meant again to discuss a situation which was to reverse the mandate of there being an opposition and there being an executive. The result, the grand coalition government. So what has happened is the politicians have betrayed the mandate as was given to the public. Because remember, Kenyans elect a government as well as an opposition, so that an opposition can oppose the government of the day in order that people get a better government. But what has happened is that the leaders, in no more tradition of their greediness and gluttoniness, have come together against the people. And therefore, the Gen Z, God bless their souls, and so on, stood up and said, hold on, these gentlemen and women have conspired against us despite what we expressly wanted, and therefore we are on our own. And they went to the streets.
Right. Do you think, Tony, that the men and women who are coming together and saying, pick me, choose me, I'm a better option than this abyss that we've sunken into, do you think that they're genuine in their ask of Kenyans to say, we want to actually lead this country and take it to a place where it is not currently? Or is it all for selfish gain?
Well, that is now the million-dollar question, because we are now in a process called realignment. You know, Jomo Kenyatta used to joke when he was asked what was the foreign policy of Kenya, and he would say Kenya has chosen for ourselves a system of non-alignment. But actually, the converse is true in the political order. We are now in a process of realignment. Why I say realignment, it is because we have got players in the opposition who are marketing themselves, who are speaking to the public, and who are saying that they have a different way of doing things than is being done by the current government. Now, the answer to your question is that process of realignment is going to produce an outcome. And that outcome will be also informed by the mistakes of 2022. It will be informed by the mistakes of previous to 2022. And given the awareness of the young people particularly, given the vigilance that I am seeing on the streets and even on social media from young people, themselves are beginning to question those people who are bringing themselves up. I've seen, for example, the former Minister for Interior, Fred Matiang'i, having to answer very serious questions when he was in charge of government. Not that he is not a credible person to aspire to office, but he is got to answer questions that people are putting to him. And I think, therefore, if you are asking me about the sum total of the people who are out there, I can also give you a different answer by saying there's a more educated, more agile, more involved electorate, and I predict that in the coming election there will be a sea of change. There will be young people, unknown people, a mixture of Gen Z from different walks of life elected, not by their prominence on television and not by how loud they speak, but I think by the content of their character. The country is reaching to a place where they are reaching down, and I can see new heroes emerging. I mean, the other day, Albert Ojwang brought even Nyanza to a standstill. I mean, people say Nyanza is in the Grand Coalition government. I saw politicians scared of going to Albert Ojwang's funeral. I mean, Gladys Wanga was there alone, but even Raila Odinga and all his ecolons in Nyanza did not go to that funeral because the people's anger was manifest despite the politicians signaling that they're in the Grand Coalition government. I am not seeing the signs from the public to equate to what the leaders are saying. If you look at the conduct of Western Kenya and you just go out there and you match the words of leaders in Western Kenya allied to government, the people are doing things differently from what the people are, from what the leaders are saying. If you come and look at yesterday in Nyanyuki, this young girl, I saw a grandmother leading a march. Joining the Gen Z in marching for justice for Julia Joki. So I am predicting that in revolutions that have happened before, and I want to tell Kenyans a story that maybe is not long. When people get desperate, I like to remind them of modern history. This is the Africa where there was Idi Amin Dada. This is the Africa where there was Kamuzu Banda. There was Mobutu Sese Seko. There was Emperor Bokassa. Even there was Said Barre in Somalia.
Yes.
And in fact, Bashir in Sudan. People do not think that they can see the end of a dictator or a tyrant. But I want to tell them that in recent African history, when tyrants fall, they fall on their sword and they fall suddenly. And therefore, to me, the answer to you is to predict that this public will just follow you because you are holding big rallies and that you are the man who seems to be in charge will be a surprise. I think that when push comes to shove, the young people, particularly the Gen Z, are going to put their foot down and they are going to ensure that they are going to inject fresh blood. And remember, this is a country that has had such blood. We've had Wangari Maathai, we've had Tom Mboya, we've had Degama Pinto and Awins Kodek. This is not a country where there has been lack of great leaders, even brave ones like J.M. Kariuki. And so let us not hover in despair that because all of a sudden the guys who are being seen now are not the people we want. The people are going to emerge, and they're going to emerge not because they're emerging themselves as leaders, but because the people's standards are so high that they will not accept something low. And you will see from coming by elections, I think now that the IBC is on some footing, there will be some time to test, the test of the pudding is in the eating. I predict, mimi naangalia na drubini nikiangalia uko mbele, mimi naona kukikuja revolution. Na revolution ikikuja, I saw it the other day in America with Trump. It has happened in the French Revolution and many others. In fact, when South Africa had to remove apartheid, it was so sudden. Because if you remember, most of the countries in the West who are holding back apartheid were doing it for economic reasons. But the people were so resilient that it became impossible to support an evil regime because the economy was collapsing. When these Kenyans go to protest, they shut down the economy. When these Kenyans go down and say we are not working on Tuesday and Thursdays, Nairobi comes to a standstill. People are saying, yes, there is a lot of injury and maiming of the public. But I can tell you the balance sheet of the Kenyan government, the cost of the demonstrations to them, if it were to sustain for another year, can bring down the government on an economic point of view alone. So it is not sustainable for a country like Kenya to continue in the path of open resistance without there being a change. So let us not also overrate leadership. Let us also give the public or the wananchi a chance to emancipate. And I want to give an example of emancipation because Kenneth Matiba's whole revolution was just breaking rank. A guy resigned from minister, told Moi, I'm going, and went out there. And all of a sudden, people started following Kenneth Matiba to an extent that it brought in a major role in the 90s. And therefore, I see something like that.
So you see a 2002 moment?
I do see a 2002 moment, yes.
Okay, we're talking about modern history and also talking about where it needs to go, asking ourselves the question whether we're sliding into authoritarianism. But if that happens on this side, you've got to look on the other side of things to say, okay, so where's the silver lining?
Look, when after the Second World War, and it's very important to give hope to Kenyans, why did we go to war? Why was Hitler a danger to the world? He was bringing a fascist regime supported by Mussolini. And so Winston Churchill said no, and England began the war looking for allies. It is because the American president, then Roosevelt, understood the danger to the world order that he joined the war and broadened the back of the British government. And the Second World War was fought precisely for the world order. for there to be a democratic component in this governance of man. Here you have two choices when you have civilizations. You either go communism and fascist, where people have no rights and have no independence, and the state is the alpha and the omega. And that is William Ruto's Kenya. William Ruto is basically Chairman Mao in a suit. William Ruto is a Chinese leader speaking Kalenjin. I condemn him because he is the worst of the worst. He is a guy who believes that a president must dictate and shout and kill in order to govern. That is the way of Russia. That is the way of the Mossad and people who do not believe in democracy. But on the other hand, when those who fought Hitler fought on the beaches of Normandy, they fought so that free men could elect governments in elections. And when elections were conducted, people would get governments that were accountable to them. And corrupt people would be put in jail. Good men would be given accolades and Nobel Peace Prizes because of their justness and their moral authority. So what I see lacking in this nation is who is right between the goons and I don't know, those who don't support the goons, but who is talking about the moral character? Where is the morality that 5 to 60 people can die in 1 month in a country under the hands and the bullets of their government? What is the moral structure that allows that either through the law of man or the law of God? How is it possible that 22, 24-year-old children are becoming the manure of our graves? And this Nairobi becomes the morgue under Sakaja and the goons that they hire to kill these people. Where does that deal with Kenya being a multi-party democracy? Where does that deal with the world order that led this world to fight in the Second World War? And that's why countries chose a side. There was East and West. The whole debate across mankind has been, how do you govern? Winston Churchill said, democracy is the worst form of freedom, but it's the best we've got. So here in Kenya, we're not just fighting a war of removing Ruto. We are fighting a war to retain our Bill of Rights, to retain our 2010 Constitution and our multi-party democracy, which ensures that the government of the day is held to account by the opposition. And for that reason, many have died, not just here, but on the beaches of Normandy. And so if Ruto thinks that killing people in Kenya will change the outcome of Second World War, let me remind him what Winston Churchill said after the War of Britain. He said, never in the history of the world has so much been owed by so many to so few, because so many few pilots were able to hold the German Air Force and stop the invasion of England.
Yet here we are. You look at then what are the options or what are the alternatives, and we seem to be in this perennial cycle where those then who are arguably in opposition come from the same roots of the government to form realignments, to form coalitions, and to say, hey, look, we are that option. We are the ones who are going to get you out of this mess.
I join you in condemning this. You know, one of my biggest problems with William Ruto is going here to Nairobi University. You see, the problem is when you are educated locally, you become a villager. You know, Ruto has never gone beyond Nairobi University.
That's not a fair statement.
No, I am telling you, and I am telling you, it is better to travel the world. No, you must travel the world so you see a bit of other things. Let me tell you, if you travel the world, you expand your mind. You begin to see how other societies live, and you also see how other societies are managed. I want to say this because William Ruto has had an opportunity of being elected a president of a country. But instead of being a president, he has become the chief person to hurt the same people who elected him. When a president stands to say, shoot people, but shoot them in the legs, that is unpresidential. It is immoral, and it is wrong. And what I'm saying, if you cannot see that here at the Situation Room, it is not Tony Gachoka who is saying it. It is just unpresidential. It is not the kind of situation you expect or words to come from a head of state. And what I would see in greater people like Martin Luther King, he would say, let us march for freedom. Let us forgive and let us forget. Mahatma Gandhi. You can go throughout history and see leaders who have faced challenges and bigger challenges like Nelson Mandela. South Africa was worse than Kenya at the height of the uprising. But Mandela, in the long walk to freedom, said, listen, we have a better way and a better route. The way cannot be shooting our children.
Yeah, so Tony, we talk about democracy as Kenya enjoys through the Constitution 2010. And the people have spoken. The people have exercised their right through Article AK-47 gone to the streets, but you've seen they have been met with war pretty much by the police. Talk about goons being hired by the governor Nairobi to come deal and protect the city. And one would ask the question, if the government would listen to what the people are saying, would Kenya be different from what you're experiencing today? And if you want to become the governor, if you become the governor, what would you do different?
Well, let us be very clear about if. Tony Gachoka will be the next governor of Nairobi. That is another debate for another day. I can assure you, and we will bring back some order. Because, first of all, you must have integrity. You must do things in a different way. You know, countries are governed by laws and not by men. You must ensure that institutions and the frameworks which exist and are created for the betterment of a society are allowed to work. For example, if you have borders, you must have a border policy to be able to know who owns a border, where is it licensed, because some people will use a border for crime, and you must have a system that can track down what is being used with that border. You must have a mapping system to know which roads are working and not working, and those mapping system would not allow you just to maintain roads, but to control traffic. I mean, there are basic ways of governing, and certainly it's not pouring garbage in front of Kenya Power in order to resolve a conflict. Nairobi has become the most corrupt, the most badly run county, and there will be a time we'll come here to talk about Nairobi. But I want to just re-emphasize why I have a problem with President Ruto and, in fact, my friend Raila Odinga. In fact, one of the reasons I came out here today is because, as many of you know, I've worked with Raila Odinga for more than 30 years. In fact, when he was Prime Minister, he appointed me to be the Director of Protocol. Na mimi nataka niambie baba na Kiswahili. And I want to tell him, baba, hii mambo ya conclave, hii mambo ya kuzunguka Kenya ukiongea mambo ya Kasongo, wachana na hii mambo. The Gen Z mzee walikuambia ukae kando. I'm advising you as TG, Raila Odinga, stay aside from this issue. If you continue to meddle and you start going around this country purporting to sell this agenda of discussion and whatever to the public, they are going to start saying Raila must go. The time is coming when the country's wrath on William Ruto will also extend to you, Raila. There has been so many attempts to bring the public to this fake table of discussion, and every time it's done, the gains of which the public have made have been taken away, and particularly by the reason you have been asking me this morning, by the ruling class. The young people and the Gen Z came out spontaneously, and they came out to fight for their generation and fight for the ideals of their time. And we, as the people who are their fathers, we should be able to give them space, because the Constitution entitles them to that space, to be able to espouse their ambitions and aspirations, and to be able to write the character of the nation they want, not for us to summon them, to lecture them about the things of which we have failed ourselves. I also want to say the time is coming when people must remember the sacrifice of Christ. When Jesus Christ was crucified, he was crucified with crowds of people who were hired by the state. They were goons of those days that made Jesus carry the cross. And he carried the cross to his death, because he had to die for the ideals of freedom, for the ideas of Christianity. And those ideals have survived these thousands of years since the death of Christ. I want to tell William Ruto, and I want to tell Mr. Kipkomen, way after your time, long after you have left this world, this country, Kenya, will remain. And the ideals for which these young people have shed blood, those ideals will be not only written in the history of Kenya, they will be written in the future evolution of other generations, never again to allow a government such as this.
Okay. Do you think that this message is reaching? Because again, we go to communication and the things that we learn. That we know that if I say something to you, if I send out a message, you as the receiver of that message, in order for me to know that you've heard it, there will be an element of feedback that will come back in my direction. That's how we know that a communication channel is complete to a certain extent.
I'll give you two examples.
Now the question is, the message to whom you're the person to whom you're sending this message this morning, it's not the first time. It's been said. People have come out in the street, for goodness sake. People have died. People have died the second year in a row, and even all this time in between. That people are saying we have an issue with the way in which things are being run. Education is dilapidated. The economy is on its knees. Healthcare is in a shambles. There's a crisis of workers who've been on the street, mind you, for the last 8 weeks. There are clinical officers who are saying we're going to ramp up this thing. Teachers are going on strike. We've not hired enough. I mean, take your pick. It doesn't matter where you look, there's a problem. Throw it's going to land on something. And this is under the auspices of an administration. Do you think he doesn't see or hear? And does it point to a deeper problem?
Well, I'll give you just 2 examples. I don't know if you're a fan of football.
I am.
Here now Kenya is about to host a major tournament.
Yes.
Well, fingers crossed and knock on wood. That
Yes.
things will be done.
I can tell you the biggest concern of this government is not whether the tournament will go well or whether Kenya will win or not. They are so scared that when this Gen Z go on the stadium and they feel those stands, whether they will be cheering the team or they will say Ruto must go. When you have a country where the president is scared, I'm telling you, when the president is out there, every time he's looking whether a shoe will be thrown or whether people will say Ruto must go. I mean, you are reaching a situation where you are asking a question where the answer is self-evident. The public themselves, I mean, if you go out of Nairobi to any cultural event, and somebody just plays a single song, tabule or something, the public just start saying, Ruto must go, Ruto must go. And the other day, even if you look at these young girls of Butere, they go and you see girls being attacked, girls just doing a play, and you begin to ask yourself what has happened. That's number one. Number two, I want to talk about the churches. You know, this is a government that came in with the Bible.
No, but Tony, you got to answer my question.
I am.
Does the president hear?
But this is what I am now saying.
Okay,
the
carry on.
moment now, even the church that brought him in is now beginning to join the ranks of the Gen Z and the protesters. And he's speaking, is left with one other option, the by-elections. So with the president here, my direct answer to you is this. The IBC has been settled. There has been pending by-elections. I want to be the first one to announce you here. The major test for William Ruto and Kenya Kwanza is going to be dealt by the ballot box. In the coming by-election, if William Ruto loses more than 1% or 2% of those seats, that will be the beginning of the end. I want to remind you of Musambweni. I want to remind you of electoral contests that have changed the course of history. So my answer to you is this. The Kenyan people will answer William Ruto with the ballot box in the coming by-elections. And they are not further than 90 days from now.
Gachoka,
and the time is coming.
Gachoka, I take you back to my earlier question, which I feel you didn't quite answer. Then look at the options. So William Ruto is the problem. We can say all day, all night long how bad he is. So this is what we have. But what then are the options?
And I have explained to you that democratic evolutions require processes. Those processes require the coming together of people through ideology, through beliefs, and through common ideals. That process is ongoing. It is a process that began, and I'm so happy, led by young people through a spontaneous protest, the Gen Z protest. And what people are not understanding is that that's how the change begins. The change does not begin now. The change does not begin tomorrow. The change begins then, when they started this process of questioning this issue. Now you're asking for the answer, and I'm telling you, the answer is not with you and me. I've looked at your age. The age that is going to decide the coming election are these 20-year-olds. These guys who are not being given ID cards. These young people you are seeing on the street being shot at. They are the generation with the numbers. They are the generations who will make a statement. And our job, if we are lucky enough, is to be among them. To be among them in the victory that is theirs, which is coming. And I want to tell you, this is not the first time this has happened. The Mau Mau struggle in Kenya was led by young people. In fact, a lot of the older people were at home telling them, you guys were going to be killed by the Mzungu. Stay at home. It was led by the young. The revolution that you're talking about of Kibaki, which is talked about when it came to the Unbogable election. The Unbogable election was run by young people. The young people came out and elected a government of change. So I want to tell you that it is in the young people that I have hope. It is in the young people that I have faith. And I think that their time is coming. And right now, because Ruto has chosen a Machiavellian principle of fear, it is better to be feared than loved. And therefore, he's exercising fear. But throughout history, when I read modern history, fear is temporary. Fear is negative. Fear backfires. Love overwhelms fear, because eventually what happens is that the grief of the people turns into a passion, and a passion turns into an election, and an election turns into a revolution.
Do you see a situation where we had young Turks versus the old guard? Then that became a revolution. We need to do away with these old people. We want fresh faces. Then we ended up seeing these fresh young people being used as weapons of the system again. And so we've had these cycles of, now it's not a question of being a youth, it's a question of ideals, belief, what you stand for. It's a question of character, which we now see through this protest, what the Gen Z are looking for. Do you see, or do you have anyone in mind who embodies that at the moment?
Actually, I have several. Unfortunately, some of them have been killed. Rex Masai. Juria Joki, she has been killed. Albert Ojwang has been killed. So the matters are not necessarily going to be alive. Maybe the revolution that will come, like the Arab Spring, will come from bloodshed. Maybe something will happen that will awaken this country to a point that nobody can believe. And the reason I'm saying this is because the young Turks of the past, which we were, we never reached this level of resistance. The young people of the now have surprised everyone. Raila Odinga at his prime never entered the CBD. He was never able to enter and stop the country. They stopped him from the environments. These young people are not just stopping Nairobi CBD. They are stopping every town in Kenya in an uncoordinated, leaderless campaign. So what I am saying is that there is a lot of analysis and a lot of interviews being done on us leaders and the people that people think are the leaders of this thing. But the people who really matter are not on TV, are not on radio. Those guys work on smartphones. They work on posters. They work with a communication only they understand, and they are focused, they are laser focused, and I can tell you they are going to pronounce themselves in the next election. And I will take and write the date we are here with you today, that the next election will bring from MCA to MP to governors people that will shock the political class.
Tony, is the government aloof in the sense that the young people, you're talking about a revolution being led by the young people who will change the trajectory of the election come 2027, yet we are at a point where the government, the leadership, president says enough is enough. I don't care. I will wait for you guys on ballot date and nitawa angusha nyinyi wote. Does he have a case?
This, you are now reminding me of Hitler's government. When Hitler was falling, he didn't believe it. In fact, Hitler was so arrogant, he even opened the second front, attacking Russia, taking half of his troops to their death in the snow. But remember, at the end of the day, when Nazi Germany was collapsing, Hitler was hidden in a cave. He was such a coward, he took a suicide pill. So do not think that because people offer other people to die, Hitler sent his men to their death, both in Russia and on Normandy. The German soldier, the SS, was even being arrested by Hitler's secret police because of cowardice. Hitler forced the German people to the brink of their destruction. In Japan, it led to even the atomic bomb, where they led their people to almost the annihilation of Japan. But leaders do that for their own preserve. But when they are pushed to the wall, most of them are cowards. Hitler died on suicide with his girlfriend in a cave. I want to predict to you the loudest people in Kenya today, the ones who are saying, should these young people, should they have no police force around them? Should they have no guns around them? I will tell you in their heart they are cowards. Who would be a brave man to kill a girl of 24? What kind of man are you to kill a child? A girl, and you call yourself a man, and you say that I've gone there to stop goons, yet you have robbed a grandmother of her grandchild. This is a government that should be ashamed of itself, ashamed of the bloodshed that they have caused in this country, ashamed of destroying this beautiful constitution of 2010 and trying to play with the dream of a young people. But you know, even the mightiest army can never defeat an idea whose time has come. It is a time for change, and change is inevitable.
Will the change come then with a change of guard? Because oftentimes you talk about all of these problems that are being experienced and or witnessed, that it is because the person at the top is not setting the tone. If it were to be removed, would that be the panacea to get rid of all the problems? A new leader comes in and then that's how all of this change, or are we looking at something more systemic?
And this is why we have multi-party democracies. The reason is the party structure in a democracy is as important as the individual who is a leader. Parties allow people to come in and develop ideologies and manifestos, but also to develop organizations that are principled to the extent that they also become a check on their leader. If you look at the ODM party now, in crisis, Sifuna wakes up in the morning, he talks the opposite of what Junet Mohammed is talking. On the other side of the ODM party, you've got Raila Odinga saying that they're in the grand coalition government. You've got Sifuna saying we are not. What is happening is this. The people who are elected on an ODM ticket are feeling the heat from the ground. So whether or not the guy in the top is trying to say something, the people in the ground are telling those who they have elected, we are not going to take this. Therefore, what I am saying, in the future, when people arise and elect leaders, leaders become accountable to those people. Now we could recall MPs, but there has been a problem because the IBC has not been formed. There is a mechanism in the 2010 Constitution to change and punish these people. There is a way through by-elections and through elections of changing the status quo. What the government has done is to conspire with the opposition. Raila Odinga and Ruto have come together to stop the democratic options available to the Kenyan people for them to deal with them democratically. And that is why the grant-based government is such a negative to the aspirations of young people. Because had there been no conspiracy between the numbers in the opposition and the government, the mechanisms exist even in parliament to be able to remove Esther Passaris, to be able to remove the likes of that in a recall election. And therefore what we are saying is that in future elections, we must ensure that the numbers of credible people who are in these political parties are more strong and organized, that no leader can run over them. And that is going to be interesting to see how leadership is no longer an issue of anointment, but a growth up process. So if a leader emerges from the people, then the likelihood of listening to the people is higher than one who is put on top, by family dynasty or otherwise.
So you said in the beginning that there is always an opportunity for hope. There is a silver lining. And what do you see that hope to be?
Well, the first thing is that the media in Kenya must be congratulated. I saw the attempt to shut the KTN and the Standard Media Group. I saw the attempt to shut other media houses during the last protest. This is what dictators do. The first thing they do is try and control the access to information and freedom, which is contrary to the provisions of the Constitution, because persons who are not informed, people who have no information, can easily be manipulated. But the media in Kenya, to their credit, have taken the blunt, and stood firm by allowing information and opinions to be aired, even when the government does not agree. I also want to tell the country that there has also been a very good role played by some of the churches, some of the Anglican church bishops who have traditionally been silent have come out along the Catholic Church and others and have begun to give statements not just of encouragement but of moral clarity of things that are unacceptable. There has been, if you remember the last time, the international community just before the last protest coming out and giving very stern warnings and comments about what the country is doing in terms of excesses. Finally, the international media, the BBC, Al Jazeera and others have taken this matter beyond the borders of Kenya. So I want to say that collectively, and particularly the other day, I was so encouraged by social media when there was an issue of tribalism. People were trying to say, look, the protests were coming from Mount Kenya or Central Kenya. And I could see all the top bloggers in the country, led by people like Coronas Rono, who is a Kalenjin, saying, I'm Karaoke, led by Cyprian Yakundi and others who changed their name and said, we are all Kikuyus. The idea of balkanizing this country into tribal outfits and tribal regions that perpetuate this kind of retrogressive politics have been defeated by a generation that is increasingly untribal, increasingly committed to the ideals of the country. And in that hope, I see a new generation. I see a Kenya where people will be judged by the content of their character, not by the color of their skin. I see a country where men and women, in fact, a large number of women are taking their role on the streets and are becoming as courageous, if not more courageous than men. And these are young women. And in them, the hope of this country lies. And as Tony Gachoka, mimi nawapatia hongera, I ask them not to give up and to remember, yes, it is painful that even Jesus was taken to a cross, but that is the only road to salvation.
at 9 a.m. Thank you so much, Tony Gachoka, for being here this morning. He aspires to be governor of Nairobi. He says we'll come and talk about that at another time, but this has been something else we look into this morning. Thank you for being here and for being a first time in the Situation Room. We look forward to the next.
We thank you for hosting Kanu, Chama cha Mama na Baba. Thank you very much.
Asante sana.
This is the Situation Room, the only way to start your day.